Hi, welcome everyone. Thanks for waiting a few minutes for people to hop on the call. And thanks for joining us today to learn more about the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation's Healthy Homes Initiative, the on-site branch of the program. This program is funded by the American Rescue Plan, or ARPA for short. And as you may know, the program will provide funding to repair or replace failed wastewater and water systems. So today in the webinar, we'll be speaking about eligibility requirements, how to apply, and answer any questions folks have about the program. Just so everyone on the call is aware, the webinar is being recorded and transcribed, and that will be made publicly available after today. So people who wanted to make it but couldn't have easy access to the information. Great. So before we get going, we'd like to do a quick round of introductions for the team leading the call. I can start that. My name is Rosalie Sharp. I'm an accessible assistance specialist focused on the ARPA Healthy Homes Initiative, which includes this program. I work in the Environmental Assistance Office. Jackie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Jackie Peterson. I also work in the Environmental Assistance Office as an accessible assistance specialist with Rosalie. Maggie?
Hi everyone, I'm Maggie Sotterella. I'm an outreach assistance specialist in the Environmental Assistance Office as well. I'm going to be monitoring the chat throughout the presentation, and we'll answer any questions that you might have afterward. Feel free to enter your questions at any time, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. And if you're calling in, we'll provide a time at the end of the presentation during the question period for you to unmute and ask any questions you have. In terms of the content of the questions, try to make them as general as possible so that it applies to as many people. Specific questions can be answered in a phone call with our specialists. And lastly, Mike, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Michael Mezzacapo. I'm an environmental analyst with the Drinking Water Groundwater Protection Division in the On-Site Compliance Office. So I'm here to act as a liaison between our teams and hopefully help answer any questions that you may have as well.
Great. So first off, Maggie mentioned it in her introduction, but you're welcome to put questions in the chat. But for the most part, if you could hold off asking your questions until the end of the presentation, we have plenty of time set aside to get those answered. Great. So I'm going to start us off talking about the three primary categories of eligibility. Awesome. So first of all, the system that you're hoping to repair or replace must be eligible, and what makes systems eligible for this pool of funding is for them to be failed by state standards of failure for wastewater and water systems. You also must fall into the eligible income range. So for low income or middle income brackets, I'll talk a little bit more about both of those things in a couple slides. And the last one is you must own your home and live in it. That's probably the simplest one to understand and explain, the homeownership requirement. It's really just that you must own your home and live in it as your primary residence. So for the majority of applicants, that will mean that you live in a single family home that you own and you claim as your primary residence. Landlord occupied multi-unit homes are also eligible, provided that that's up to 4 units. Going into system eligibility a little bit more. Jackie, could you switch slides?
Is this what you need? Or is it not working?
I can't see that the slide has changed, but
That's unfortunate. Hold on.
In here, it's do I qualify?
Yeah, me too.
Sorry about that, guys. I'm just gonna stop sharing and try sharing again and see if that fixes the problem. How about now?
I think it's loading, but potentially. My screen is still black.
Oh,
Using
Anything?
multiple monitors.
nope.
We can give it a minute. Go ahead, Jackie.
If you can't see anything, maybe Rosalie, can you share your screen, or Maggie?
Yeah. I need just a second there. Oh, well,
I see it now. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's give this a shot. If it continues not to work, I can start sharing my screen, or Maggie can. Okay, so getting into system eligibility here. This is one of the top questions we've gotten since the application opened, which is what constitutes failure of a system. So for wastewater, or most commonly septic systems is what we're talking about here. This slide offers some examples of what might constitute system failure. An important point here is that systems that are failing because of a one-time event or can be fixed by a minor repair to the system are not considered eligible. So an example of that could be that if someone flushes a diaper down the toilet, it clogs a pipe and sewage backs up into the home. That could appear that the system is failing, but that's being caused by a one-time event that can be fixed by a relatively minor repair, not a more intensive overhaul to the system itself. So something like that would not be eligible. But to run through the indicators that you might see that could indicate failure of a wastewater system. Septic contents could be backing up into a building or a structure. Septic contents could be exposed to air somewhere along the system. Septic contents are pooling on the surface of the ground. Septic contents just discharging directly to surface water, so running into a stream or a pond that's on your property. Or septic contents causing a failed water supply. So that would be if your septic was leaking somewhere and contaminating your drinking water supply. Or you've been told by a licensed designer, engineer, or government official that your system is considered failed or inadequate by state guidelines. Yeah. For drinking water systems, the same thing is true about minor repair or replacement of one-time events. If it's not a reoccurring issue or is something that could get fixed by a relatively minor repair, your system would unfortunately not be eligible for funding through this program. So an example in that case is if you had a contamination issue that could be fixed by treating your water, that would be considered a minor repair. Okay, and to quickly run through the list of things that would most commonly indicate failure of in drinking water systems. If there was a known source of contamination impacting the drinking water source, including a contaminated site, a leaking underground storage tank, or other contamination source. If testing has revealed contaminant levels above the acceptable standards for any of the following: arsenic, E. coli, total coliform, fluoride, lead, manganese, nitrate, nitrite, uranium, or adjusted gross alpha particle activity. Insufficient quantity of water for normal use of the building. So this has been a pretty common one that I've heard people are dealing with, which would be if you use a spring or a shallow well and your water system goes dry for part of the year or goes close to dry and you don't get enough water into your home to meet your needs, or if you're told by a licensed designer, engineer, or government official that the system is failed or inadequate. Great. So moving on to income eligibility. There's two tiers of income assistance, since the program provides different levels of assistance depending on households' financial needs. So tier 1 is the lower income tier. This is for households earning less than $65,000 a year household income. They would be eligible to receive 100% of the cost of design and permitting up to $5,000 and up to $20,000 for the full cost of their project. So that's the construction phase of the project. The applicant would need to hire, once they've been approved for funding through our office, the applicant would need to hire the contractor themselves, and the state would issue payments directly to the contractor so that lower income Vermonters aren't fronting the cost of an expensive project.
Rosalie, can you explain household income to the folks?
Yeah, what we're asking for with household income here is the income that you report on the Vermont Homestead Declaration. So that there's somewhat detailed instructions on that form about what income needs to get reported on there and what counts as an exclusion. But anyone who owns their home and lives in it as their primary residence or domicile follows that, submits that form with their taxes every year. So if you're new to Vermont, you might not be familiar with the form yet, but it is a requirement because it impacts your property tax rate. So you can pull that income directly from there, and it ends up being income for adults in the home that are earning income for the most part. Okay, so for tier 2, this would be middle income Vermonters, households earning $65,000 to $120,000 per year. You would be eligible to receive reimbursement after your project is completed for 50% of the cost of permitting and design. That's up to $2,500, and 50% of the cost of construction, and that's up to $10,000. So in that case, it would be in the form of reimbursement after the project was completed, and reimbursement to the homeowner. A note about tier 2 income eligibility is that there's currently incoming guidance from the U.S. Department of Treasury on income guidelines and thresholds that might impact the upper tier of that range for middle income Vermonters. The guidance isn't finalized yet, but as soon as we get issued that, if it impacts this income bracket, we'll add it to the program's instructions and to the application itself. But for now, applicants who have already applied don't need to make any changes to their application. And for people who are looking to apply and fall into this range, this eligibility range, you should submit an application now.
You heard the eligibility requirements and you're thinking, hey, I qualify. What do I need to do next? We're going to have you fill out an application. Our application is online and the link will be provided at the end of the presentation. Information you need to fill out the application is mostly things that you're going to know offhand, things like your site address, your mailing address, what your income is, what's wrong with your system generally. The one thing you will need to know ahead of time is a Permit Navigator result. And what a Permit Navigator result is it's from the Permit Navigator, which is a free service that offers guidance on what permits you might need based on the location of your home. So I have two things I'd like to highlight about this, are that it's free and that it's not starting the official permitting process. It's just guidance. So there's nothing official or obligatory about it. Our general timeline is that applications are available now. They've been available since March 4th, and applications are due on April 15th. So you have plenty of time to fill out applications, almost a whole month from now. And we'll announce recipients in early May. How are we selecting those recipients? We're looking at a couple different criteria. We're looking at things like income, household demographics, the severity of your system failure, and the environmental impacts that your project might have. So generally how this will work is we're going to take all those applications we've received up until April 15th, and then we're going to rank all those applications based on the criteria that I just mentioned. We'll then select the top ranking applicants for our verification process. So we took you at your word for what you offered in the initial application. So we'll then need to verify what you stated in your application with some documents. So generally what this looks like is we'll ask for a W-9 to verify your household income, or we'll ask for that Vermont Homestead Declaration to verify that you own the land that you live on. And for system failure, we'll use notices from qualified engineers or designers that state that your system has failed. Or if you don't already have that, we'll send a state official out to confirm that your system is indeed failed or inadequate. Once you send in all this paperwork, you're good to go, you're confirmed, and you'll be awarded beneficiary funding or a rebate. So what does this look like once you've received funding? If you're in Tier 1, you'll get your beneficiary funding paperwork, and you can then hire your designer or engineer. They'll then submit their paperwork so that we can issue payments directly to your designer or engineer. They'll give you an estimate of the project cost, and we will pay them 50% of that cost up front. You can then begin to work on your failed drinking water or septic system. After the system is complete, you'll submit your final invoice, and we'll issue payments for the remaining balance of the bill, up to $5,000 for design and permitting, and up to $20,000 for construction. If you're in Tier 2, this looks a little different. So if you're in Tier 2, you're going to hire your designer and engineer. You're going to pay for all that cost up front, and then you'll submit your final invoice to us, and we'll reimburse you for up to 50% of the cost of design and permitting, up to $2,500, and up to $10,000 for the cost of construction, and that's 50% of the cost. If you already installed your system and it was installed after March 3rd, 2021, you can still qualify for a retroactive payment. So the step there is you just submit your final invoice from your system repair, and you'll receive 50% or 100% of the costs based on your income tier. I've included a couple links here that I think you'll find helpful. The first one is to our application instructions. I recommend you read those before you fill out the application. The second link is to the application itself. And the final link is just a little bit of information about our program in general. I've placed both mine and Rosalie's contact information on the screen. Feel free to write that down if you have specific questions that you want to ask us. I will say that we've received a lot of interest in the program, and we're working through a little bit of a backlog. So it might take us a couple days to get back to you, but we will get back to everyone. And I think at this time, I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions. Turn it over to Maggie, and we'll answer some questions for you guys.
All right, so I'm adding those links to the chat right now and the contact information. We did have a few questions come in. Let me go first one. So Shane asked, is this a self-diagnosis if you have any of these issues with the water systems, or do you have to be a licensed person to say it's failed? And Megan our program manager, Megan, did answer this in the chat. And she wrote, for the purpose of applying, you do not need a formal determination from a licensed person that the system has failed. If it seems you qualify based off factors just discussed, you should apply. Rosalie and the team will be working with applicants to confirm eligibility prior to awards going out, including a formal determination that the system has failed or inadequate. I don't know if you, Rosalie or Jackie, have anything else to add to that.
I don't have much to add to it. If someone needs further clarification, they can definitely ask in the chat, but I think Megan covered it.
Great. And then as far as income goes, is it 2020 income, 2021 income? What are you looking at?
So ideally, well, I'll say for right now, for this initial application, what you'll find on there is it asks you to it's a multiple choice answer, and it'll ask what income bracket you fall into. So I did see that someone was asking for about the cutoff between at $65,000. So I think for most people, having a vague sense of their income will allow them to answer that question. If you're awarded funding, and we're looking for verification of income, home ownership, and system failure, at that point, that's when we're going to ask for you to submit the homestead declaration. And ideally, we're asking for the most recently filed homestead declaration. So since we'll be going through that process in early May, we would expect that to be for the 2021 year. There may be some people who need to file an extension on their taxes or something like that. And we can deal with those extenuating circumstances as they happen. But for the most part, we're expecting the 2021 homestead declaration.
Great. We have a question about how is the state distributing payments to contractors or designers who are working with clients making under $65,000? Is it at the time of billing?
Yeah, I think Jackie covered this after the question was asked, but I can go through it quickly, which is the contractors will submit a W-9 once we've selected who's receiving the funding and the person gets in touch with you. You'd submit a W-9 to the state. The contractor would make the estimate for the work, and the state would issue a check for 50% of the estimate. At that point, you'd go through the design process, complete the work, and once you've submitted the certificate of completion to the state would issue you the other 50% of the payment.
Great. We have one more question in the chat. Feel free to keep asking any questions you might have and adding them there. I'll give a time for people calling in to ask anything in just a minute. Shauna's asking, is there any idea on how many applicants who are determined to qualify will be awarded the total funding available for the entirety of the program?
Yeah, so the funding that we have that's for this fiscal year is roughly $1 million. For the next 2 fiscal years, we are expecting more funding, but it hasn't been confirmed yet, so I can't guarantee that. But the hope is for applications who were not selected in this round, they would just get continued to be reviewed in the next application cycle, which would be in the following months after this period ends.
I was wondering if you guys wouldn't mind if I just kind of explain the permit process to folks, because it is a little bit different than them applying to the ARPA program.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
So when you are a homeowner and you are applying to fix your water supply or your wastewater system, you use a licensed designer or engineer that are licensed by the State of Vermont. And so they are applying on behalf of you. So you provide information to a licensed designer or an engineer. They typically do site visits. They make all the drawings and the plans, and then that gets submitted to the state for a permit. That's reviewed by a regional engineer who makes sure that all the calculations and everything are correct for your site, and then you're issued that permit. So early on, Rosalie was mentioning like how the first payment is made out. So you would be working with your designer. They would then submit everything to the state for the permit. And that's when you can get, if you're tier 1, $5,000, up to $5,000 if you're tier 2, up to $2,500 for that design and permit phase. And then once that happens, once you get your permit, a designer works with the contractor who typically digs the holes, has the piping and everything like that, and constructs the system. And then before they bury it up with dirt, the designer comes back to look at the system to make sure that everything was built how it was supposed to be. And then that's when that designer makes that, we call it an installation certification. And then for that second half of the payment, that's kind of what triggers that. Once the designer says, yes, this was built correctly, that gets sent to us, our office in the state. We file that, and all the documents with your permits are available online. They're publicly accessible. So those get filed there. And if you have any other requirements with your permit, like specific inspections or something, that would be walked through with you, and then you would understand what you would need to do. But I just kind of thought maybe it'd be helpful to understand that whole process.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike.
All right.
Actually, go ahead, Maggie.
Yeah, there's a couple more questions in the chat, but just to give an opportunity to the people calling in and who do not have access to the chat, feel free to unmute at this time I'll give it a minute or so and ask any questions you have. Hi, yeah, we
Hello?
can hear you. Yep, we
Oh,
can hear you.
okay. All right. I am a phone-in person, and so I don't have a screen, and I need those links. How does that work?
So I can send them to you directly via email. You can find them on the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation's website. I have had some reports from folks that they had a hard time finding that on there. So if you look on the website, look for the ARPA Healthy Homes Onsite program and can't find the information.
Say it again, the name? The
ARPA, ARPA, Healthy Homes Onsite program.
Okay.
For wastewater and water systems for Vermont homeowners.
Okay.
So if you can't find, if you look on the DEC's website and you can't find the information you're looking for, you should send me an email and I can send you direct links to those pages.
Okay, I missed the first part, the first 5 minutes of this presentation, so I don't know what your email is.
Gotcha. Okay, it's also on the screen now, but I can spell it out for anyone who's on the phone, which is, my email is rosalie.sharp@vermont.gov. So ROSALIE.SHARP@vermont.gov. And the whole word Vermont is spelled out there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great.
I'm calling in and I have a question too. Does this only pertain to people who are having a problem with the pandemic?
No, anyone is welcome to apply. I think there's a wide range of things that we could consider problems related to the pandemic, and dealing with a failed septic may or may not be more difficult for most Vermonters right now. So anyone is welcome to apply.
I don't have a failed system. I have pipes, but they run quite a ways from my house to a neighbor's house and down a hill. We need to replace the pipes. Would that be also applicable to your replacement?
Yeah, so that's a pretty site-specific question. I can say that if it's not a system that's considered failed, then you're not eligible for funding through this program. And in that case, a single pipe issue would not constitute failure. But if folks could try to hold off on answering those very specific questions and try to contact me directly with those, that would be great.
Okay, I'll do that.
Great.
Will you be covering the cost of the inspections?
Yeah, is that, I assume that means, I'm not sure which inspection that is about, but so the process.
Once the system is installed, a licensed designer needs to come out and inspect. They charge for that service.
Yes, yeah, so that inspection, yeah, that would be included in the cost of your project. So yes, that would be included. And also I can just make a note right now that if someone has a system that they believe is failed and are looking to get that confirmed, because we do need confirmation of failure either by a state official or a licensed designer. And we are working on getting funding for that to make sure that everyone has access to it. So that will be covered as well, even if you're not, because that's before formal approval of funding.
Great. I did see that Kristen had her hand up. Is that still the case? I think it went down. Okay, great. All right, so Bev is asking if we can show the tier 1 requirements again. If we want to go back to that slide so people can look at that. Susanna, I think your question is a bit more site specific if you want to give a phone call. And let's see. So Shane is asking, are payments retroactive in tier 2 or 1? Say a failed system is determined today or last month, the work is done, final invoice has been paid. Once the start approves your app, can you still receive reimbursement?
Yeah, so
Yes, you can receive. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Rosalie.
Okay. You can receive reimbursement as long as the project was completed after March 3rd, 2021. And that's for either tier 1 or tier 2, just the amount that you're eligible for varies.
Okay. All right, we have a question. Will applicants who qualify under tier 1 automatically have priority over those who qualify under tier 2 in the event that there's not enough funding this round?
They won't automatically be considered in front of tier 2, but we are using, we're trying to gauge applicant need as the primary prioritization factor, and income is a big part of that. So if you fall into tier 1, it is likely that your application will receive some prioritization based on your income need. We want to also understand that there are cases that people fall into the higher income bracket, but are supporting a really large number of people in their home. And that will also be factored into applicant need.
Is septic tank pump out when you found failure, the cost of that included?
I actually don't know the answer to that. I would guess that it is, but I don't know for certain, and I can look into that and get back to you. I would recommend whoever asked that question to send me an email with it, and I'll look into it and let them know.
Joyce is asking the general cost of the permit process.
Mike, do you know that one?
For a single family residence, a typical single family residence in the state of Vermont, the state of Vermont charges a fee of $306.25.
Thanks, Kristen.
All right, I'm not seeing too many more questions in the chat. Is it worth asking more specific ones, or? We just got one. What is the licensed designer cost?
Licensed designer costs range in the state of Vermont depending on the licensed designer and their licensing background and sort of where they're working. Anywhere from about $2,000 to get through the application process. Upwards, depending on the size of the system, you could be looking at $6,000 to $8,000.
Okay. We have a question. If you have a shared well and the person whom the well is on is not your own land, as well as there is no written agreement of that well being shared, do you qualify?
Yeah, so that's another pretty specific question. I can tell you, and a unique situation, I can tell you what I think that would be considered as is that since there's no written agreement that you have access to that well, it would probably be considered that you don't have a water supply, which would then be considered an inadequate system. That's my take on it.
Was it in place before 2007? It would be grandfathered in.
I see.
Somewhat similar question, also more specific, but without any other questions, I'll give it a shot. What if you're working with a neighbor to put in a shared system for 2 owner-occupied homes? Could we submit a contractor invoice to show to us? Could we submit a contractor invoice to us showing our portion of the cost? This may be a question for a phone call.
Yeah, so I need to look into how you should submit an application for that in terms of income reporting. But my understanding is that a shared system as long as it's under 4 units, is eligible. But in terms of how to submit the application for that, I need to do a little more research. So that person, I would recommend sending me an email about it.
I have a site-specific question, if no one else is has a question that's more general.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have a situation where we have tree root, we live in town and we hook up to the town sewer. And we have a situation where we have called specialists in because of tree roots to blow them out. And they are saying that they can't keep doing that, that we have to replace the old pipes that connect to the main sewer. Is that something that's likely to be appropriate for this? I mean, it hasn't failed yet because we don't even put toilet paper down. You know, we have to be really careful.
Right.
But
so
it will fail any second.
Right. So a couple things about that. One is that town sewer is not eligible, to my knowledge, to this program. It needs to be an individual system. But
it is our system that's going to the town. It's our individual system that's going to the town.
So your issue would actually be classified as what's known as a minor repair.
Okay.
If you had a on-site system and you were putting in a brand new connection to the sewer line, that would be a failure that you are fixing through this program. The replacement of an already permitted pipe is a minor repair.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, all ready. So not eligible?
Are you asking a question? Is that Pete? Seems like maybe not. For the person that had the grandfather situation, potentially, they asked if they qualify in that case, in the case of a grandfathered situation.
It would depend on the, is there something wrong with the water supply, or is it simply that it's a shared well on somebody else's property?
I haven't seen anything about possible failed or inadequate systems on that for that question. They said inadequate water.
So it doesn't meet 2 gallons per minute flow rate? You can't run a shower and flush the toilet at the same time.
Not sure.
Okay, that might be a question that we should follow up with later. I'd recommend that that person sends me an email, and if I'm not able to answer it at that point, I can get in touch with Kristen and we can get a more specific answer out to you. Sure.
Somebody's asking, is the income net or gross, basically?
My understanding is it's gross. But you should use the income that's reported on the Vermont Homestead Declaration. There's instructions you can access that form online, and there's also instructions for filling out that form online that are very detailed for what income should be included and how you should include it.
I have an income question. So my system hasn't been certified as failed yet. So I'll have to go through that process. So this would then mean 2022 is when I would do the work. And so what my income question is, would I then be able to use my 2022 income, not my 2021? Because I have a retirement distribution that's going to make me ineligible now. But if I don't take that again next year, then I'll fit in the guidelines.
Currently, what we're asking for is for applicants during the verification process to submit their 2021 income, because that will be going through that verification process with applicants this May, which means that you just filed your 2021. If you're approved for funding later, that may change for the fiscal years that haven't been formally approved yet, if we end up getting that funding. But for funding that's awarded through this fiscal year, you would need to submit your 2021 income in order to get approved for the work now.
Mm-hmm. So if the work is done in 2022, this is my question though, I guess. Let's say it gets done in July of 2022. I've already filed the application. I'll report my 2021 income. And I know that the 2021 income, based on what you said, I'm not going to be eligible. But if I don't take a retirement distribution, it makes a huge difference. So I'd file, I guess maybe I'd be in the second year of the funding and use my 2022 income then, as opposed to 2021 income.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, in order for us to, if you're applying for funding now, in order for us to approve you for the program, to guarantee funding from this fiscal year, we would need your 2021 income.
I got that. And so would your recommendation be go ahead? I've already filed my application and I think you let me know, Rosalie, that you had it. So you may say, yeah, you met all the requirements, but you don't meet the income. So we can hold you for next year, see if you meet it next year. Is that what would happen in my case? I would have to reapply.
You would probably need to reapply, yeah, because you would be found to be ineligible at that point.
I guess I was wondering if there's any way of getting clarification on whether or not retirement distributions, which are subject to a lot of variability, whether you need them or required to take them.
I believe that it's required on the Vermont Homestead Declaration, but it may depend on the specific type of requirement distribution, or sorry, may depend on the specific type of retirement distribution that you're talking about. I'm not a tax expert. I would recommend looking at the Vermont Homestead Declaration and checking out your individual situation on there.
And if you've already applied, do you need to do anything else? Should it go forward and get the design work done?
That's up to you. We can't guarantee funding for that, but if you want to move forward with the design process, that's up to you. If you're not found eligible for funding, then we wouldn't, we can't guarantee that we're going to be able to reimburse for that work.
But I guess it's conceivable, right, that in future years, and I understand you wouldn't know this now, that would projects that were done this summer be eligible retroactively for reimbursement a year from now, as they are now, if you go back to 2021?
That is possible. It's not something we can guarantee.
Okay, thank you for all of your work and taking these questions.
Great. We have a couple questions in the chat. Debbie asks, when does the work need to be completed if awarded in 2022?
Sorry, I got distracted. When does the work need to be completed if awarded in 2022? So if we need to designate where the funding is going by 2024, and I believe the work should be completed by 2026. And that's spring 2026, so by the end of the 2025 construction season. Yeah, Mike?
I was just going to say that if you're classified as having a failed system, there's a specific date that requires the system be installed by. We can't tell you what that is until the process is completed and when you apply for those. But typically we give a certain amount of time to repair a failed system. So that would also be based on that permit. Right, so let's pretend you applied right now. We may give you till the end of November to complete the work on that system, unless your designer runs into an issue like you can't get some parts. Then they can ask for an extension, and then it would flow into the following year in 2023. And that's okay because you said you have up till 2026 or 2024 to use the funds. So, but the time the work is completed will be based on a couple of variables, and we can't give you a straight answer because it really depends on when you applied for the permit, what kind of system you're installing, and what kind of the supply chain issues are going on at that time. And I know we all don't like uncertainty, but we just want to be open and honest.
All right. Can you guys talk about the complementary funding for those who don't qualify, may want to try other sources, or need more than the award amount?
Yeah, so we're looking into other programs right now that we can suggest to people if they either don't qualify or do qualify and we aren't able to get them funding or go over the award amount. We're working with partner organizations to do that. There are some that I'm already aware of, and I've been directing folks to those if I think they're eligible for them.
Great. Is there a good way for people to check to make sure their applications were received?
You should have received a email from Jackie Peterson. When you submitted the application, it should have automatically sent you an application submission receipt at that point. Other than that, it would be to check in with one of us to make sure that it was received.
Great. So I'm not seeing any new questions in the chat. I did want to make sure people on the phone heard both Jackie and Rosalie's phone numbers and email addresses. So if you want to share those out loud to everyone, that would be helpful.
Sure, Rosalie shared hers, so I'll share mine. Mine's a bit longer. It's Jacqueline.Peterson, and I'll spell that out. It's JACQUELINE.Peterson, PETERSON, and that's at vermont.gov. And my phone number, and specifically if you have trouble using a computer and you want someone to fill out an application with you over the phone, feel free to call me at 802-461-7128.
Do you want to repeat your phone number just one more time in case people didn't hear?
Yeah. Sorry, I know I talk fast. 802-461-7128.
Great. And Rosalie, I know you did share your email, but if you want to share your phone number, you want
Sure.
to your email again?
Yeah, I can share my phone number. That's 802-461-7433. And I do just want to let people know that I've received a really large amount of incoming calls in the last 2 weeks since the application opened, and my lag time for getting back to people's voicemails is about 5 days at this point. So just be patient with it. I'll get back to you at some point, but it probably won't be within a day of when you call.
Great. John is asking how much of a cost breakdown is needed to get reimbursed. Will you rely on the licensed designer to confirm the actual cost of construction?
So we're not asking for any specific breakdown. I think it's just any kind of formal invoice that you get or estimate that you get will be satisfactory for us. We just want to avoid the scribbled notes on a piece of paper. So just any formal piece of documentation you have for that will be fine.
Do you have a list of recommended contractors for this work? For say a septic system replacement?
So as the state, we can't give you a list of recommendations because that would be seen as biased towards certain people. So I would just recommend looking within your area for people.
Put in the chat.
Designer has particular contractors that they like to work with, and we'll put you in touch with them.
Great.
Sorry, I put in the chat list to licensed designers and engineers across the state. So if anyone needs that.
Great. And I also added the link, the form link, if people wanted to get an email follow-up with the webinar recording and the presentation. Feel free to use that and enter your email address. David's asking, do new wells for single-family homes need to be permitted if already completed? How would the date of completion be documented? Date of invoice.
I have a question. You mentioned other sources can be provided for those people who didn't get any funding for whatever reason. And I'm wondering do they get provided when you make your announcements of who did get funding? How does that work?
Currently, we haven't made any formal decisions about how that outreach will go. We have a really large number of applicants, so we can't really provide, like at the time that we're making awards, we won't be able to reach out to everyone's individual situation and let them know what other programs they qualify for. But if you have questions about that, I might be able to point you in the direction of some that work. So feel free to send me an email.
Thank you.
We're hoping to be able to make more of a generalized recommendation later on after the review process has happened.
And the other question that I have, because I'm a phone person, is the person that was speaking just before I asked said that there is a link to get a recording of this session, and I can't see the link. So could someone say it out loud or send it to me?
Yeah, I can share it's a link. It's a form where you can enter your email address so you can get on our email list to get the recording and presentation. It's forms.office.com.
Yep.
So forms.office.com /g/p. I don't know if the case really matters. Lowercase p, uppercase F, uppercase K.
S like Sam or F like Frank? GP.
G/PF as in Frank, K, M, 0, UX, that was just one UX, CJZ. And feel free to email, I guess. I don't know if there's another better way, if my link
Thank you.
didn't work out.
Thank you.
Sure. And forward.
I just want to address the last question that Maggie asked about that came in the chat about new wells for single family homes and the permitting needs there. I think Mike wants to jump in and answer that.
Sure. So they would have had a permit, and then there's an installation certification that's required once the designer confirms that the well was drilled and all the piping and everything is set up to the permit plans. So that installation certification would be documentation for completion. And that should have been supplied by a licensed designer if they had their permit and they had the well drilled. So, but if they have specific questions, I guess you can forward them to me or Kristen.
A failed water supply may have also met the requirements for the well driller's exemption, in which case they would have a well driller's report and a well driller's exemption form and not necessarily a permit.
Great. And I just want to mention that this funding is not first come, first served. So feel free to take your time on the application before the deadline next month. And all applications received before the deadline will be considered using the priorities and criteria that Rosalie and Jackie mentioned. And we have about a minute left. So I don't know, Rosalie, Jackie, did you have any kind of closing thoughts?
I don't have any. I want to thank everyone for coming to this and asking your questions and your interest in the program. If anyone has a question that comes up after, feel free to get in touch with us.
I'll just mirror that. Thanks everyone for being here, and feel free to reach out with questions.